Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sweet Combat, Season 1, Episode 12. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're obviously picking up with the conclusion of the dance, which I should really quickly bring up. I haven't talked about it at all, but the fact is the dance does not happen in the webtoon. That is something they made specifically for the TV show. Because it's interesting, too, because the two schools rarely, there's no point of the entire schools interacting. Only time that really happens at all, and even that isn't really isn't applicable, is the tournament, because there's people from that school who participate in the tournament, but it's not necessarily this school versus this school in the webtoon. It's just fighters from different places kind of show up. I don't think they ever, maybe they are all from the same school, but it's just they never delineated it like that. It just seemed like fighters from all over the place. Some people from the wild, some people from the school that Hieshin and them go to, but either way, this is the most interaction between the schools themselves that happen in it doesn't really happen like that in the webtoon. Like I said, other than some frequent characters you see that pop up from the school, other than that, there's no like I said, no actual interactions. We never even met the principal or of the other school, so that's kind of an interesting difference I haven't really brought up either. But yeah, so I wonder if that's something they'll focus on more in the show too, just the interaction between the schools. This might be all we get, but that is kind of something interesting. But anyway, going back to just talking about the dance itself, obviously we're picking up with Yanan and Guanyan, which once again, they're so adorable. It's actually really disgustingly cute, but she's kind of pushing him away after he pulled her in, being like, yeah, I'm with a special girl. And then they're continuing to dance though, and you can tell she is having a fun time. And later on, when they're looking at Xiaomi and how they're she's they actually make a really cute pair, and Guanyan's yeah, very compatible. And she's what are you talking about? And he's no, nothing. She's what are you smiling about? Whatever. It's she doesn't know what to do. He's really catching her off guard. But them having fun together and everything, I think is so cute, because she's hi, I won. Zhao Feng didn't really get a dance, so I can't wait for her to do the crab shuffle. And Guanyan's what's the crab shuffle? She's you haven't seen it? And she hops up and starts doing it. He's oh, so that's how it is. And it's so adorable. And then at one point, Guanyan helps a little girl who's about to get hit by someone on a bike, and he slips on some stuff on the ground, and roles kind of get reversed. And in that moment, Yanan is kind of taking the lead in that situation, and she grabs him, and the way she's holding him, and everyone nearby is looking. I'm it's actually a very beautiful switch of the roles moment. But then someone nearby is what are those two guys doing? And she's guy, you want to come back here and say that in my face? What makes you think I'm a guy? And she starts wondering, does anyone think, does everyone think I'm a guy? Why does everyone keep making it mistake? Which Guanyan's well, if you don't want that issue, you could start dating someone. And she's dating who? And he's kind of adjusting his jacket, I'm the perfect candidate. She's so is that how you see me? He's no. But they kind of joke about it, but it's no, he doesn't see her that way. He just sees her, once again, he said it, she's a very special girl. That's all, that's how he's always viewed her, even before recently, as we learned from his conversation with her dad about how when he started liking her and when he became captivated. So I thought that was cute. Really quickly, since I brought up Zhao Feng, I feel so bad for her, because it seems like she's the only person that got no love at this dance, because she even noticed that the principal from her school, the president from her school, actually asked Chunhua to a dance, because there's that whole joke where she was okay, I gotta help out all these girls set up stuff, but I need time to put my makeup on. They're oh really? Who's gonna ask you? When have you put on makeup before? But it's nah, she got invited. And Zhao Feng is so wait, what? She's getting a dance? And then a dude walks up. She's go ahead, you can take me, you can dance with me. He was actually no, I'm sorry, I was actually going to ask her. And she's just sitting there. She sees Yichen show up, and she's hey, Yichen, dance with me. And then he starts acting like he's in pain. He's oh, I'm sorry, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm man, she just that sucks, dude. I legitimately, despite her it being a byproduct of her terrible attitude, but it's legitimately she's the only person that got no love this dance. Things didn't quite work out the way Hao or Xiaomi wanted it to, but even they paired up. It ended up being, well, I'll go ahead and talk about it. That was weird. I mean, first and foremost, because the four of them were hanging out, Ming, Tian, Queen, Xiaomi, and Hao, that it's like, okay, like, Tian and Queen keep looking at each other, so Hao asked her to dance, and she's like, no, and Tian was going to use this as an opportunity, but Hao dragged him away because basically it's Xiaomi's plan is like, all right, at the very least, if as long as Tian's not around, I'm not going to give you an opportunity. So she's following Queen everywhere, whereas like Hao was supposed to keep an eye on Tian. I thought things were going to get complicated when it's like, oh, we're taking pictures with some of the female students from the other school, but I thought it'd be an issue where like, oh, Queen and them find out like, oh, here he is, like rather than kind of wanting to hang out with us, like here he is, want to hang out with the girls. I thought that's what it was going to be, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like Hao's the only one that took all the pictures. It seems like the moment Tian had an opportunity, he just slipped away. But yeah, like his attempt to keep an eye on Tian backfired. Xiaomi's attempt to keep an eye on Queen backfired. And funny enough, the two of them found their way to each other. And it's just like, oh, like she's staring at her. She's like, what? She's like, I just never seen you dressed like this. You're beautiful. And she's like, oh, well, you're quite handsome yourself. I mean, she's like, I mean, like you look very nice, like in your formal wear. And it's, becomes, she's like, yeah, it looks like you might know how to dance. Do you? And he's like, no, I don't know how to dance. And she's like, well, it's kind of like combat. You gotta dodge. And like the movements are similar to combat. And he's like, so do you think you can teach me? He's like, as my combat teacher, you can, it makes sense that you would be the one to teach me. And she's like, yes. Once again, I figured they would end up dancing. I just wasn't sure. Because I was like, there's no way they're going to miss the opportunity to dance, like, together. Like, there's no way they're going to let that happen. But then I'm like, I wasn't sure what the circumstances were going to be that would put them together. It's a roundabout way, but, it's very them for that to be the roundabout way they start dancing together. It's actually really adorable and cute. And then kind of on that vein, Xiaomi is so upset because, like, Hao was supposed to keep an eye on Tian and he failed miserably. And now she's like, I'm supposed to be dancing with him, but neither one of us knows where Tian or Queen are. So how to make it up to her, because he's like, oh, you can dance with me, but she's like, no, I don't want that. So what is his solution? He puts on like a cutout of Tian's face. I was like, what is? I was like, this is weird. And Xiaomi was 100% there for it. I was like, that's so weird. And even I was asking, like, why did you have, like, it's already weird enough you're doing that, but like, why didn't you turn it so that it covered up your face? Why do you have it turned to the side of your head so you have to constantly be turned to the side of your head for her to see it? But I guess the argument is like, well, if it's covering your face, you won't actually be able to see, and you don't want to do the creepy thing of cutting out the eye so that you'd be able to see him wearing like a mask. It's like, that's weird. But like I said, Xiaomi was a lot more okay with it than I thought. Obviously, she kept telling him to turn his head and shut up and stop talking. But just kind of like, oh, like she's kind of caught up in her fantasy. And this is where Yanan was like, oh, they're actually kind of a cute pair. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that's something to keep in mind. But it is like, yeah, like Xiaomi was just like, I think Hao doesn't, like, he likes Queen, but he's not all about Queen. He, like I said, it's just his position on Queen is not nearly as strong as Xiaomi's position is when it comes to Tian. It's like they're not like fully on the opposite side of the spectrums. Like he's kind of on the middle ground. He's fine with like liking Queen, but also like spending time with Xiaomi. But like for her, it's like it's Tian or nothing, I mean, as we even saw with him, he was like super happy to take the photos with the girls because, like, yeah, like he likes Queen and he'd like to spend more time with her, but he's also not like I said, obsessed like Xiaomi is, And once again, it's that interesting thing that like every character is like on, like, I mean, I wouldn't even say Queen's obsessed with Tian. She just likes him, and it's just that's the only person she really likes currently. And then Yanan's kind of in her own like complicated space because like Guanyan like super likes her, but like I think she's just not used to. I mean, we don't fully know what her experience is like with people, so we don't know if like she's used to people liking her. People have always probably treated her certainly because she's always just been herself, and that's kind of probably like for some guys that might be off-putting, but not for Guanyan. It's like, no, it just makes me like you even more, you being you. But either way, it was like I said, that cutout like Tian face was so weird. It's just so weird. But yeah, that's the basically majority of the dance, which I felt bad for Xiaomi too, because they never ran into Queen or Tian again. She was just at the school breaking brooms in the Taekwondo club just because she needed to vent her frustration. And then eventually she kind of breaks down and cries until she learns from Hao, like, wait, what time is it? And he's like, 4 o'clock. The moment she ran off, I was like, right, he has to go to work. Because let's not forget, like, Tian gave both her and Yanan his schedule. Obviously, Yanan might not even correlate that and think like, oh, where would Tian be? It's like, she probably have to think about it for a second, but immediately Xiaomi's like, oh, I got his schedule memorized, so I'm going to show up at his work. I know exactly where he's going to be, even no matter where he is right now. I know where he's going to be because it's time for him to go to the car wash, so... Tian and Queen had the whole conversation about, right, fighting someone. It's like, right, fighting Hao is fine and everything, but he's a street fighter. You need to have more experience with someone kind of in a similar level to you who, like, fights more traditionally in a lot of ways. And so the person she has him go up against is her brother. I was like, they did it! I mentioned this a few episodes ago, that this circumstance, I think it's this entire circumstance right here is actually how Queen's brother and Jaegu actually meet. That's like their first interaction is this in the webtoon. So that's why I was like, oh, like for them to meet the way they did, I was like, oh, I guess they're not. No, it's like, no, it just happens later on. It's just, I thought that was kind of dope. It's like they already are introduced, but it's not like they know each other. So he has the same, like, the webtoon does it same way of like, oh, isn't he kind of your little brother? Like, isn't this kind of unfair? But obviously he's got enough training because they have enough, time and resources to, like, he's pretty good. And even later on, Tian's like, yeah, if you were like a little older and we were in a similar weight class, you've trained a lot more than me, so you would have won. But he did eventually, like, break through and end up, like, getting a good kick on Zhao, just because it's like, right, he's fast, but he's not nearly, his punches don't have the power that Yanan does. So it was kind of a neat thing. And obviously the brother thing of, yeah, like, I still got to test you whether or not, like, I can give my sister to you or whatever. And she's looking at him like, shut up. And later on telling Tian, like, don't listen to him. My brother says, like, weird things. But, they got to have an opportunity to talk and be very open. And we learned that her parents are dead in this continuity. I'm like, I'm pretty sure her parents are definitely alive. You never really get to meet them. I think they're in, like, one panel. But, like, you never, like, once again, like, anyone from her family, outside of her brother, the only person from her family you really interact with at all is her grandfather. And even then, like I said, that's, like, a dozen times over the entire webtoon. And even then, that's quite a bit later on when you really get to see him pop up from time to time. But yeah, her parents died. And so it is a thing of, that's why they have an even, like, closer tie to their grandfather because of what he lost, like, his entire future. He's kind of staking it on both Queen and her brother, because it's like he wants someone to be able to take over things when he's gone. And she even tells Tian the story about how we got a little flashback of this in the first episode, but we get the full context of it. Her wanting to sign up for the school to be a fighter, because every other aspect of her life, even deciding on whether to be a boy or girl, was kind of like, that choice was kind of taken from her. She always had to adhere what other people wanted. But here in the ring and in a fight, that's a place that only she gets to decide what happens. She, gets to determine the outcome, not it being determined by someone else. There's freedom in that, she hasn't really felt her entire life. And her brother being like, I've studied enough. The fact of the matter is, obviously what my future holds, being as smart as I am, I won't necessarily need to go to college. So it's like, right, let me have all the responsibilities and then let you go to, school, and she can work at the company from time to time, And it's like, if it wasn't for him, she wouldn't be able to go to school. And for Tian, that means a lot to him, because it's like, right, he thought, like, considering his circumstances, getting into the school was a possibility because of a scholarship. It never crossed his mind. He's like, I never thought that someone with your, like, connections and you're as powerful as your family is, I would have never thought you would have complications getting into this school. I would have thought it would have been like a, no-brainer, easy done. But it's like, yeah, despite being from different worlds in some capacities, everyone has their own difficulties. It's a complicated thing when you go from like, well, I'm everyone has their issues. It's just sometimes when you overlap, like, oh, that's your issues, but it's like oh, that's a rich person issues versus a middle class or poor person's issue, and it's like that's where you can get into it. But it's like, rich people have their issues too. They can be sad, and you even be like, oh, can you really be sad being as filthy rich as you are? It's stuff like that. Like, it's not so black and white. There is shades of gray to that situation. And Tien's kind of hearing more and more of that, because there was a conversation about, obviously, like, her and her brother, kind of like the whole conversation made Tien talk about his position of, it's like, yeah, his siblings can be like spoiled sometime when it comes to him, but it's like that responsibility of feeling the need to kind of take care of them and kind of be the one they rely on. Obviously, Queen also brings up her Uncle G. It's like she was able to be vulnerable with him in a way she could never, like, oh, when I needed to cry about something, I could be there with him. Even, he could be the one person I can turn to despite my, when I can't show those tears to my grandfather. And it ends up being this situation of, I think that's what prompted Tien to be like, having that person that's comforting, as she was talking about with her Uncle G, and even saying like, right, he wasn't in my life for a very long time. So I guess they aren't like family. Like, once again, it is like he was like an uncle to her, but not that's why I was like, I wonder, is that like her mom's brother, her dad's brother? But the way she talked about it, it's like he wasn't in my life long, meaning like he was kind of like, it seemed like a family friend type of situation. Like maybe he was like a brother to like her father or something like that, but who knows? And they also still have not drawn the connection that they both like know him, and their past are tied to him in different ways, and how it's affected them and made, like, how it's molded them into who they are today, in different ways. But it also gets to that point in the conversation where it's like, oh man, we were having such a good conversation. Now what else do I say? And Tien's like, oh, kind of think of something else to say. Like, the silence is awkward, but all he can say is like, oh, I gotta go to work. But then you see this smile on Queen's face when she's like, oh, I could like have you like we could drive there, and she's walking away because she's probably thinking like, well, at least I get to spend a little more time with him as we go there. But I don't think they talked much in the car either, so she wanted to help out, but he was like, no, you don't have to. He doesn't want her to kind of overextend herself. Which is sad too, because obviously when he gets there, Zhao Mi's already there and offering to help. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't want your pay to get cut, so you left the dance like halfway through, but I knew this is where you'd be, so I wanted to help out. I'm already in the uniform, so let me help out. Goes home with him. They're preparing food. She wants to cook. It's like, right, and we learned a little bit more about her. It seems like her circumstances are exactly what they are in the webtoon, which is interesting because the dynamic she brings up is something we never talk about. It's just kind of like, yeah, her mom like has a cooking show and program and stuff like that, but the fact is that she doesn't get to see her mom a lot is an interesting development. Because once again, I was wondering whether or not that was going to be... I should bring this up now, and we'll talk about it more probably when I get to the end, but this series is pretty damn faithful. Yes, there are things changed here and there, but for the most part, this is a pretty faithful adaptation with some, like, modifications and changes overall, but, like, it's a pretty faithful adaptation. It's kind of surprising, But once again, like, maybe it's just some of the stuff I've like come across that are adaptations. Either I've never read the original source material, or read or watched the original source material, or it's been so long that I forgot. Like I said, that's what makes this so unique, because once again, I spent like the past month or two reading the entire webtoon. So I might forget some details here and there, but for the most part, the entire story, like, I pretty much have it like, pretty fresh in my mind. So that, like I said, that's what makes this whole thing so unique in comparison to the other, like, adaptations that I'm familiar with, like, either way. But yeah, so, like, the whole point I was going on, that whole diatribe, was, like, going back to it, that Zhao Mi feels like, right, she's like, no, my mom loves me, obviously, but I just don't get to see her that much because of her job. In fact, even saying she learned how to cook by watching her mom on TV, which is like, there is something kind of sad about that. But it's like, no, my mom she's very busy, running a TV program and cooking. So it's interesting, like, that's kind of her connection with her mom, is through that. Once again, like, it didn't seem like... once it, based in the webtoon, they never really explored that angle to it. It seemed like her mom was there pretty frequently, like to wake her up. In fact, her mom would constantly try and drag her onto the television or to help out and stuff like that. So I'm sure we'll probably dive into that more as the series progresses. And I love her and her little fantasy, thinking about like, oh my God, we're cooking together. She's like, it's almost like we're newlywed cooking dinner together. And she got so wrapped up in her fantasy, and that he's calling out to her, and she's like, huh? And I love that she kind of looks back to the screen like, oh, like I don't know, I got caught up in my days. But sadly, Queen, who already felt bad because she's like, oh man, like he must be tired after everything today. He fought with my brother too. So man, I should have insisted on helping him. So she stops by his house, but sees him and the kids hanging out with Xiaomi, and she's feeding him too and cooked so much stuff. And she had stuff with her, and it's kind of the inverse of a couple episodes back when Tien overheard the conversation between her and Yana, and so it's like almost a similar thing. Like she could have, but she didn't want to. And also seeing Xiaomi like feed him, and just she kind of walked away defeated, you know. And now she's interpreting it as, oh, that's why he didn't like ask me to help him at the car. Why he refused my help is because he already had plans with someone else. It's like, no, he had no idea Xiaomi was going to be there. Once again, misunderstandings galore defines that relationship so much. This relationship between these characters so much. Once again, not just the TV show, the webtoon as well. So many I mean, to be fair, their entire relationship has been based on a foundation of misunderstandings all across the book. But yeah, like, and when she gets home and she's thinking about all that, and she's like so pissed thinking about it, and she's stabbing the eggs in her food, and her brother's like, what are you doing? And he's like, are you, oh, you're jealous? And she's like, I'm not jealous, you know? And because she's making, like, I guess it's supposed to be, she's the radish in this situation, and Zhao Mi is supposed to be the egg. I think it's supposed to be the parallel. But... and she was just frustrated because it's like, yeah, and she's not used to admitting. She's like, no, I'm not jealous or anything, even though she super is. And like I said, it's so adorable. So, but yeah, after that, obviously the preliminaries are right around the corner, so everyone's going back to their training and getting ready. So that's where things end up off of the episode. So I brought it up last episode. I was like, either they do the start of the preliminaries this episode, but it seems like it's all going to start next episode. Maybe. I don't know if the entire episode, like maybe it won't be until the end of the next episode that the preliminaries start or what. But it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.